I want to tell you about a client who came to me drinking 2 bottles of wine every single night. Not 1, 2. Now, she was in her mid-50s, watching her waistline expand and feeling ashamed that every single morning she had to look at herself in the mirror, and she was totally convinced that the only way that she could get out of this situation was a strict diet that would make her miserable. Her name is Tina. And in 6 weeks, not 6 months, 6 weeks, Tina dropped over 30 centimetres from her body measurements, reduced her alcohol consumption from 2 bottles a night to sharing 1 bottle with her husband over an entire weekend, dropped 3 dress sizes, and wore a dress she had been saving for years to her Christmas party at work. And she never once felt deprived. She was never shamed. She never had a single conversation about willpower. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how we did it. I'm Loz Antonenko. I'm a health and performance coach, and I've spent years working with busy professionals, women and men, who've tried everything and are still stuck. Not because they lack discipline though, not because they don't know what to do, but because nobody has ever helped them understand why they're doing what they're doing and what to actually change first. Now, Tina's story is one of the most dramatic transformations I've ever seen, but not because it's special, and not because Tina is special. It's because what worked for her will almost work for anyone watching this video right now. Now, by the end of this video, you're going to understand why restriction is almost never the real answer, what a handbrake habit actually is, and why unlocking just one of them changed everything for Tina, and the exact 3-part approach we use step by step, so you can see whether it applies to your life as well. Now, here's how this video is structured. Firstly, I'm going to walk you through where Tina was when she came to me, and I'm going to be honest about exactly how bad it was, because that kind of honesty is what makes this super useful. And then I'm going to break down the 3 pillars of the Mojo Method that we used, which is handbrake habits, protein first fueling, and the habit stack. And then I'm going to show you Tina's full timeline, her actual results, and what you should do if you recognize yourself in any part of her story. So let's go. When Tina first contacted me, she was 54 years old. She was a professional, busy, intelligent, high functioning in every single area of her life that people could see. But privately, she was struggling hard. Every single night she'd come home from work, pour herself a glass of wine, and by the time she went to bed, 2 bottles of wine were gone. She'd wake up the next morning already dreading the evening, already knowing it would happen again. Now, she wasn't drinking because she was irresponsible. She was drinking because she was stressed, because she was tired, because the wine had basically become her signal for her nervous system that the day was finally over. And alongside that, her waistline was expanding. She wasn't fitting into clothes she loved. She avoided looking in the mirror. She stopped going to events she used to like because getting dressed up had become the source of shame for her. And she came to me expecting me to give her a really strict meal plan, and she really expected me to tell her to stop drinking. That's actually not what we did. Here's what most people get wrong about situations like Tina's. They think the alcohol is the problem. They think the waistline is the problem. They then attack those things directly. They cut out the wine, they go on a diet, and then they restrict. And it works for about 4 weeks, and then it falls apart because they never addressed what was actually driving the behavior in the first place. Now, in the Mojo Method, I call these things handbrake habits, and these are the specific patterns in your daily life that are creating a ceiling on your results. Not because you're weak or undisciplined, but because your body and your brain are responding rationally to an environment that hasn't been set up to support you. Now, Tina's primary handbrake habit wasn't the wine. The wine was a symptom. Her primary handbrake habit was eating, and she was under-eating protein, skipping structured meals, and arriving at 6 p.m. with a depleted nervous system with no fuel left, which meant alcohol was the only fast lever she actually had up her sleeve to feel better. You can't willpower your way out of physiological response. You have to change the inputs. And that's what the Mojo Method does. And that's what we did for Tina. So before I walk you through exactly what we did, let me give you the framework. The Mojo Method, it's built on 3 pillars. Pillar number 1 is handbrake habits. And this is identifying and unlocking the specific patterns that are capping your progress. Pillar number 2 is protein first fueling. And this is restructuring how and when you eat so your body has what it needs to function, which removes the physiological drivers of cravings and poor decisions. And pillar 3 is the habit stack, which is building a sustainable, progressive structure around your lifestyle so that the results you create don't just disappear, the moment that life gets hard. Now, each of these 3 pillars builds on the last, right? And in Tina's case, they work together to create a result that she basically still describes as nothing short of a miracle, which, I'd push back on because it wasn't a miracle, it was a method. Now, let me explain handbrake habits properly, because this concept alone has changed the trajectory of the thousands of clients I've worked with. A handbrake habit is any habitual behavior that's creating a drag on your body's ability to function, regulate, and change. Think of it this way, right? Imagine you're trying to drive a car somewhere, but the handbrake is half on. You can still move, right? And you're putting in effort, but the car is working against itself. The engine is fighting the brake. And no matter how much you accelerate, you're basically not going to go as fast as you should be, and you're burning more fuel than you need to. And that's what a handbrake habit does to your body, right? Now, common handbrake habits include skipping breakfast, under-eating protein, relying on caffeine as your primary energy source, eating most of your food late at night, poor sleep patterns, and chronic dehydrations. Now, any of these on its own will create a physiological environment where fat loss is harder, cravings are stronger, energy is lower, and willpower is constantly depleted before the day is even over. When I assessed Tina, she had 4 clear handbrake habits working against her. Number 1, she was skipping breakfast and often lunch, eating pretty much almost nothing substantial until dinner. Number 2, her protein intake across the day was extremely low, and she wasn't eating nearly enough to support her metabolism or her muscle tissue. Number 3, she was relying on coffee to get through the morning and the afternoon, which was keeping her cortisol elevated and her blood sugar unstable. And number 4, by 6 p.m., her body was running on empty, her nervous system was in a stress response, and the wine was the fastest thing available to bring it all down. Now, none of these habits made Tina a bad person. Every single one of them made perfect sense given her lifestyle, but together they were creating a compounding problem that no amount of willpower or motivation could solve. So, the first thing we changed, and this is counterintuitive, was not the wine. What we did is we introduced breakfast. A structured, protein-rich breakfast within an hour of waiting. Not complicated though, not a meal plan from a magazine, just consistent protein-first eating at the start of her day. And within the first week, Tina noticed something unexpected. She was less hungry by the evening. Yeah, the pull towards the wine was slightly, not dramatically, but slightly reducing. That reduction, it happened not because of discipline, it happened because we started regulating her blood sugar, managing her cortisol through the day, and ensuring her nervous system arrived at 6 p.m. with actual fuel in it, instead of running on fumes and desperately seeking a fast fix. And this is what unlocking a handbrake habit looks like. Right? You don't fight the symptom, you just remove the cause. And when the cause is removed, the symptom often resolves itself. And we didn't tell Tina to stop drinking. We just made the drinking less necessary. The second pillar of the Mojo Method is what I call protein first fueling. And I want to take a few minutes here because this is probably the most misunderstood element of body composition, energy management, and craving control. Most people think about food in terms of calories. Less food in, weight comes off. Now, really, that model is incomplete, and for most women over 40, it's actually counterproductive. Now, here's what the research shows and what I see in practice consistently. When protein is insufficient, your body has a harder time maintaining lean muscle tissue. When you lose lean muscle tissue, your metabolism slows. And when your metabolism slows, the amount of food you need to eat to maintain your weight, it drops, which means the same habits that kept you stable before are now causing you to gain. And on top of that, protein has the highest satiety factor of any macronutrient. It keeps you fuller for longer, it stabilizes blood sugar, it reduces the physiological drive to snack, to reach for sugar, and critically, to reach for alcohol. Now, protein, it's not a diet food, it's a regulatory system. And for most of the women I work with, getting protein right is the single highest leverage change that they can actually make in their life. For Tina, we didn't make this complicated. The goal was simple. Every meal contains a meaningful protein source. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, not a supplement shake as a replacement. We're talking real food, protein anchored at regular intervals. We're talking eggs at breakfast, a chicken breast or a piece of fish at lunch, a palm-sized protein at dinner. Simple, right? Repeatable. Not a diet, just a structure. We also worked on something I call the 5 p.m. protocol because 5 to 7 p.m. was Tina's highest risk window. The transition from work to home, from basically high alert to wanting to decompress. And we built a simple habit into that window. Before anything else, she had a protein-rich snack. A handful of nuts and some cheese, Greek yogurt, leftover chicken, something that put protein in her system before that craving window opened. And here's what happened. Within 2 weeks of implementing protein-first eating and the 5 p.m. protocol, Tina's evening cravings, for food and alcohol, started to reduce meaningfully. She wasn't fighting the urge anymore. The urge, it was simply smaller because the physiological driver of the urge, the blood sugar crash, the cortisol spike, the energy deficit, it was no longer as severe. By the end of week 4, Tina had gone from 2 bottles of wine every night to 1 glass most evenings. Not because I told her to, and not because she white-knuckled it, but because she genuinely didn't want 2 bottles of wine anymore. Her body had stopped needing what the wine was providing because we'd given it something better. And that is the power of addressing the root cause instead of the symptom. Here's the part that most coaching programs get wrong. They get someone a result, and then they celebrate. And then they walk away, and 3 months later, that person is exactly back where they started, sometimes worse, and because nothing was built to hold the results in place, that's where it ends. And results without structure are temporary. Now, that's not a harsh truth, that's just physiology. The third pillar of the Mojo Method is what I call the habit stack, and that's the reason Tina's results have lasted not just in the short term, but in how she lives. The habit stack is a progressive layering system. Now, you don't need to change everything at once. You change one thing, and then you stabilize it, and then you add the next layer. And here's how it worked for Tina. Layer 1 was breakfast. We installed that first, yeah? Nothing else changed while she was getting that bit right. Once breakfast was consistent, after about 10 days, we added the protein structure across the day. Same principle. Install it, make it automatic, then we move forward. Layer 3 was the 5 p.m. protocol. We then added hydration targets. Then by week 4, we introduced walking, not a full exercise program. I'm talking just 20 minutes a day, which is enough to shift cortisol, improve insulin sensitivity, and enhance sleep quality. Now, every single new layer made the previous layer stickier. Each habit supported the others, and by the time we reached week 6, Tina had built a daily structure that was so embedded in her routine that it didn't feel like effort anymore. It felt just like how she lived. I want to highlight something about Tina's journey that I think is just as important as the physical results. When she came to me, she was really ashamed. Ashamed of the wine, ashamed of her body, ashamed that she, a competent, intelligent professional, couldn't seem to get this one area of her life under control. That shame is incredibly common, and it's also incredibly destructive because shame doesn't motivate sustainable change. It motivates short-term punishment, restriction, deprivation, white knuckling, which always eventually collapses. What the habit stack did for Tina was remove the shame from the equation because there was nothing to be ashamed of. There was just a system that wasn't working, and it was being replaced by a system that did. By the time she wore that dress to her Christmas party, 3 dress sizes down, energy she hadn't felt in years, alcohol intake reduced by something like 90%. She wasn't celebrating deprivation. She was celebrating capability. And that's what the Mojo Method is designed to create, not willpower, capability. Let me give you the actual week-by-week breakdown so this feels real and achievable rather than abstract. Week 1, we installed breakfast, protein rich within an hour of waking, nothing else changed, just that. Week 2, we added protein structure across the day. Every meal has a protein anchor, and we also started tracking hydration. Still, no conversation about wine, right? Week 3, we introduced the 5 p.m. protocol, a protein snack before the high-risk window. Tina noticed the pull towards wine starting to ease. She was actually really surprised, because she'd been bracing for a fight that really wasn't coming. Week 4, we added 20 minutes of walking a day. Now, not a gym program, a walk. And we introduced a simple wind down practice in the evening, something to signal to the nervous system that the day was over so that the wine didn't have to do its job anymore. And week 5, Tina's measurements were already dropping. She was sleeping better. She had energy in the mornings that she actually hadn't felt in years, and her alcohol intake had dropped to 1 glass most evenings, and sometimes actually none. And week 6, she wore the dress. 30 centimeters gone from her measurements, 3 dress sizes dropped, 2 bottles of wine a night down to sharing 1 on the weekend. Body fat reduced significantly, energy restored, and not a single day of feeling deprived, shamed, or punished. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Tina's story, the evening cravings, the expanding waistline, the feeling that you're doing everything wrong even though you're trying really, really hard, here is exactly where to start. Do not start with restriction. Do not start with cutting things out. Start with adding. In the first 30 days, your only job is to install these 3 things. A protein-rich breakfast every single day, a protein anchor at every meal, and a 5 p.m. protocol, something that fuels you before your highest risk window in the day. Now that's it. Don't add exercise yet. Don't overhaul your diet. Don't start tracking calories. Just those 3 things consistently for 30 days. What you'll find, and I've seen this happen hundreds upon hundreds of times, is that those 3 things alone will begin to shift your cravings, your energy, and your body composition. Not because of magic, because you've started addressing the actual causes instead of the symptoms. Let me give you the complete picture of what Tina achieved. In 6 weeks, over 30 centimeters lost from her total body measurements. 3 sizes dropped. Alcohol consumption reduced from 2 bottles nightly to sharing 1 bottle over a full weekend. Body fat reduced significantly. Energy levels rebuilt. She now describes her mornings as genuinely energized, which she said felt foreign to her at the start. Sleep improved, directly connected to the reduction in alcohol and the nervous system regulation work. And she wore a dress she'd kept in her wardrobe for 3 full years to her work Christmas party. But I want to give you the result that matters most to me, and I think it's actually the one that matters most to Tina too. She never once felt punished. She never felt deprived. She never had a conversation about willpower, and she never had to go sober. She just had to change what was coming first. Let me show you the contrast because I think it's important. The traditional approach to Tina's situation would have looked just like this, right? Tell her to stop drinking, give her a calorie-restricted meal plan, recommend she joins a gym, and hope motivation carries her through. Yeah? Now, that approach would have lasted maybe 2 weeks before the restriction became unsustainable, the cravings overwhelmed the willpower, and, she was back to where she started, basically. Except now, with an added layer of failure and shame. The Mojo Method approach was the opposite. We worked with what was driving her behaviour, we addressed those drivers directly through nutritional structure and habit layering, and we let the behaviours we didn't want to fall away naturally because they no longer actually had a reason to exist. Now, that's not a motivational concept, that's a biological one. So let's bring this together. The Mojo Method has 3 pillars. Pillar 1, handbrake habits. Find the specific patterns that are capping your progress and then unlock them. Don't fight the symptoms, remove the causes. Pillar number 2, protein first fueling. Restructure how you eat so your body has the regulatory support it needs, which removes the physiological drivers of craving and poor decisions. And pillar 3, habit stack. Layer new habits progressively so that results become embedded in your lifestyle instead of dependent on motivation. If there is one thing I want you to take away from Tina's story, it's this. The thing you think is the problem almost never is. The drinking wasn't Tina's problem. The shame wasn't Tina's problem. The waistline actually wasn't Tina's problem. The inputs that were driving all of those things, that was the problem. And when we fixed the inputs, everything else followed. That principle applies whether your version of Tina's story involves wine, sugar, late night eating, missed meals, or any other pattern that you've been trying and failing to change on willpower alone. If you see yourself in Tina's story, if you're someone who's tried the restriction approach and watched it fail, who's exhausted by the cycle of starting over, who suspects there's something more fundamental going on that nobody has helped you identify, I want to help you find the answer. And the quiz is the fastest way to get there. The link below takes you to the Fix Your Mojo quiz, our free 2-minute diagnostic that identifies exactly what's getting in the way of your results and points you straight to the fix. That quiz takes 2 minutes, right? After you complete it, you'll see exactly what your handbrake habits are and whether the Mojo Method is the right fit for you where you are right now in your life. There is no sign up, there's no pitch, just clarity on where to start, yeah? The quiz link is in the description below. It takes 2 minutes and the results are immediate. And if this video was useful, if Tina's story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You'd be surprised how many people in your life are in exactly the same position she was in and have no idea that there's a different way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.